I think everyone everywhere is struggling with the same problem and trying to use data and processes in new ways. So a lot of HTAs are being set up all over the world, trying to, sort of take a moment and stop and let's review the evidence base and really try to figure it out and then allow the product to go on the market. So I think everybody's setting up those processes. But again, individual countries have their own systems and maybe preferences. So France is, more inclined to negotiate behind the, closed doors. Maybe Germany is doing some very aggressive things and looking, at pricing in different ways. NICE has traditionally used cost effectiveness. Maybe they're moving out of value-based pricing. The other, I think, big difference is in Europe, the game, I think, for pharma is don't change my list price because it'll be reference priced around, the continent. So when they go to a country, they can't change the list price. So that backs them into doing creative things, creative discounting without changing the list price. Patient access schemes, they're sometimes called. We'll give you the first cycle for free. Or risk-sharing agreements, which are hard to do, but they're trying. So we'll keep our list price, but if it really doesn't work, the data shows doesn't work, we'll change our price. Whereas you don't have the same dynamic, I think, in the US. Because in the US, a lot of these prices are not public. You know what I mean? The companies are negotiating with the plans, and nobody knows exactly who's paying what. It's the companies are price discriminating in a way economists would argue. And it may not be a bad thing, but I think it changes the dynamic of how it plays out in terms of how evidence is considered and how reimbursement and pricing, are being done. I mean, I think there's a good argument to be made. Why are you guys in pharma so against this? Is actually something of an opportunity for you. If you could really be a leader in showing your products offer efficiency and cost effectiveness, you have an advantage. And I think they agree with that. They just don't like the idea of a standard and certainly a centralized body, telling them what to do as opposed to a marketplace where they could, have many decision makers. So I think they get it. They have to bring value arguments. They are gearing up in all kinds of ways to do that and to collect the data and think about that through the life cycle of the product. But I think they don't like the a centralized bureaucracy judging them on those grounds. On occasion, I get invited to these not often, but to these venture capital. I hang out with people who dress much better than I do, and it's a very different meeting because they're just oriented in a very different way. They want to know what you just asked, and they don't like the uncertainty. That's part of what they're really, sort of pushing against. Just tell us what the rules are, and then we can play this game. And it may be longer, it may be shorter, but if you don't tell me what the rules are, I don't even know how to think about investing in this company. I guess the conventional response is it can only lengthen the time to market if you add a hurdle out there. And there are a lot of discussions about parallel review, harmonizing FDA and CMS and EMEA and reimbursement agencies in Europe with a hope that will shorten the time. I think that it sounds conceptually appealing, but it's going to be very hard to do that. If you look at FDA and CMS in the US, they have a memorandum of understanding since last year on, doing parallel review. They have a notice in the Federal Register, I think, last September. And, well, one thing is, if you read the notice, it's written by bureaucrats, with a lot of, sort of very cautious language. We're going to consider things. We're going to look at this. We'll only do this if we're asked to do it. That we don't want to impose a requirement. We want to try to do this because it's going to be a good thing. If you look at the comments that came back from the venture capitalists, the pharma, they were really pretty negative about parallel review because I think the feeling was, okay, you're telling us this will shorten the time. We're afraid it's just going to lengthen the time. It's just going to add bureaucracy and hurdles. On the drug side, CMS has covered most of what goes through FDA, so why would we ever want that? Maybe on the device side we could, but the fear is if you put FDA and CMS together, you'll get CMS's, preferred outcomes, which will be longer-term outcomes, not FDA's. And if you have longer-term outcomes for regulatory and reimbursement, that there's a fear that that will lengthen the time. So, possibly there's other reforms and people are talking about them, efficient trials, adaptive trials, and all that do eventually shorten the time. There's a lot of talk about early engagement with payers, and I think that is useful to do, and maybe that helps shorten the time. But I think, on the ground, it's just hard. It's hard to do those things.